Hey everyone, Roman Prokopchuk here, Ukraine News, September 19th, 2022. Russia has increased its targeting of civilian infrastructure. The Ukraine armed forces crossed the Oskil River and took its left bank under control. About 200 occupiers were killed in the explosion in Sovotove and Luhansk Oblast. Ukrainian armed forces sink Russian barge carrying military equipment and personnel. Armed forces of Ukraine capture hundreds of Russian soldiers during a counteroffensive. Russia lost a total of 533 units of heavy equipment since the 6th of September. Around 3.7 million tons of food left Ukraine ports under the grain deal. Russian missile hits South Ukraine MPP's industrial site, 300 meters away from reactors. Occupiers report a new attack on the POW camp in Olenivka. Ukrainian prisoner of war dies. Spain to train Ukrainian soldiers in the use of tanks and anti-aircraft batteries. So Ukraine is basically moving in the Luhansk Oblast at this point. Basically crossed over, created a bridgehead into the Luhansk Oblast, and basically crossed over without really much opposition, getting heavy armor equipment over the Oskil River, and at this point, starting and continuing this offensive that took majority, I would say 95% of the Kharkiv Oblast, and moving it in the Luhansk direction. So now we are here, and you can see the river, and they're actually a lot of white space, and see they're basically across at this point. River goes this way and kind of almost creates a border between the Luhansk and Kharkiv Oblast, but they crossed over. There was a destroyed bridge in the area that they crossed over. They created a pontoon bridge. They crossed over, and basically at this point attacking Liman in several directions. And the ongoing battles over here a few months ago, as we're in the news, that Russia threw everything at Severodonetsk in Lysychansk. There's an opportunity to take Lysychansk, which is a high ground, and then recapture Severodonetsk. You can see Ukrainians have pushed into this white space in and by Bilohorivka, right over here. And from here, they're actually moving north and south. They split. So there's an amount of soldiers, a group moving in terms of Ukrainian military south in the direction of Zolotorivka, and then one moving north. So it's kind of crazy that Ukrainians still pushing. Obviously, they got, as I mentioned, hundreds of pieces of heavy armor, tanks, vehicles, artillery, and ammunition, which now is going to actually help and fuel this continuing counteroffensive. So it looks to me like there's a new tide in terms of the war, that there's only one area that Russia's really throwing any kind of troops at over here in Bakhmut, but those have failed day in and day out in terms of capturing territory or capturing Bakhmut itself. So that's really the only main offensive push, which isn't yielding any results. So there's not much strategy being changed on the Russian side in terms of how they've operated and their logistics. But like I said, Ukraine is pushing into the Luhansk Oblast, which The Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts are the main objectives in the war currently, quote unquote, before it was to liberate all of Ukraine from Nazis, take out Zelensky's government, replace it with a pro-Russia, pro-Putin regime government, and basically denazify Ukraine. Well, Kiev offensive failed. They couldn't take Kharkiv. They've essentially lost the Kharkiv Oblast. Kherson is ongoing fighting in terms of this Kherson counteroffensive. Actually, around Kherson also, it's interesting to know that 3 anti-missile batteries were taken out today as well. So that leaves a more friendly outlook in terms of air superiority and dominance of the skies in and around Kherson. Obviously, the last few days as well, it's been reported that there had been street battles. There's Ukrainian forces aren't in Kherson itself, but there are partisan and freedom fighters behind enemy lines fighting. So here's Kherson. On the northwest side of Kherson, there were 3 batteries taken out. There were also 5 reconnaissance drones and a helicopter shot down the 19th of September. So there is a lot of obviously ongoing fighting going on. This has opened up as white spaces as well, and Ternovi Pude over here, and then potentially within the north of this counteroffensive as well. You see Kamyane over here, Yubemivka right here, and day by day there's more settlements being liberated. And over here, Sukhi Stavok is now under Ukrainian control. Kostoromka and Prushinsky over here, and Shtasleva over here as well. Obviously, it's not necessarily blue liberated, but it looks it's no longer Russians under control. So obviously, this changes hour by hour, day by day. But you can see the front. In terms of the southern offensive, isn't necessarily like in Kharkiv. They started with a pinpoint area, broke through the defense lines, and then spread out and circled back and took over the whole oblast. Here, kind of the front line is hundreds of miles long, and day by day, there's more progress. Obviously, Ukraine is using everything in its arsenal in terms of its Air Force, HIMARS, howitzers, artillery, and everything else to potentially move. But as most people know, the terrain in the south is a little different than it was in the Kharkiv Oblast. Kharkiv Oblast, there's more elevation, there's forest. Here it's open plains, farmland, same as in some parts of Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts. So it's very much like a Kansas per se. If any of you in the U.S. have driven through or live in Kansas, it's kind of like that. And obviously the other major thing that's developed is the bodies and the buried 450, 500 bodies in the forest outside of Izum, a lot of which were shown to have signs of a violent death and torture, with people still with their hands and legs tied up, whole families straight up executed. People interviewed about Russia starting within that area of 6 months of occupation, holding torture chambers and police stations and creating their own police force that if you spoke out, if you said something, if you crossed someone in terms of a Russian occupier, you'd be tortured, oftentimes killed. So obviously the Russian liberation of Ukraine follows kind of the same suit in terms of murder, rape, and torture. That's how you liberate a fellow quote unquote Slavic nation. Yeah, okay, got it. So Bucha, Irpin, Mariupol, Izum, and the countless other genocides and mass murders across history. So yeah, we don't need that kind of liberation. No, thank you. Pack up, go across the border, and see you later. And leave Crimea and everything else. But I appreciate everybody listening, tuning in, subscribing. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, Slava Bohu, Slava Nazi. God bless.